Coogs House. The Big 12 has long been known as a basketball heavy conference with tons of basketball history from top to bottom. And Houston's got the greatest Big 12 basketball player of all time.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, a podcast all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Appreciate making us first listen each and every day when joining the conversation, but you don't know what to say. Tell us in the comments down below. Okay, I don't know whether to ask about where you like to eat in Katy because they asked about food and they were talking about a guy from Katy or whatever. But let's go down that path. What do you like to eat in Katy, Texas? Do you ever venture out that far? Today's show is brought to you by Nissan. I guess the place to get your car to get you out that far. But more on that later because Houston is the home to the best Big 12 player, the greatest Big 12 player of all time. And I don't even think it's that controversial anymore. And we're going to talk some about that in this one, talk some about the guard developments that exemplifies for Houston, and talk about like that we might have just kind of gotten a glimpse at what comes next. But I'm here to tell you that L.J. Cryer is the greatest Big 12 basketball player of all time. You play to win the game, as they say, and L.J. Cryer is the now four-time Big 12 champion. He's the only non-Kansas basketball player to do it 4 times. Only player to not do it at Kansas. And he's done it by winning at 2 different places. Now, if you remember, L.J. Cryer went to high school in Katy and then went to Baylor, where he played his first, I guess, technically 3 years because you count the COVID year of college. They won a national championship 1 year, yada, yada. I don't want to talk about that Final Four too much. Brings up bad memories. But he then transferred to Houston in the summer of 23, kind of as he sees Marcus Sasser leave to go to the league, sees the good guard development that Houston has, wants to come home as Houston's entering the Big 12 and play for a contender at home. And he's been such a big part of that. But in making the argument that he's the best Big 12 player of all time, I want to stress a couple things. One, I'm not talking about the best Houston Cougar of all time or anything like that. I'd go with the Keem. I also wasn't alive for 5 Slam Jam. That's mostly me reading Mirren's book and understanding history and things like that. I know people that were alive might go back with Elvin, or some people might say Drexler. I don't know, right? Like all that's to say, lots of options on that. That's an interesting argument. But in terms of the Big 12, as a Big 12 conference, I don't think it's arguable that if there's one player that has won 4 conference titles, they're at least in the running. And then we look at LJ compared to other guys that have come through and got 4 conference titles. He sticks out head and shoulders above the rest in other elements as well. I went through and looked at guys from Kansas that have won 4 conference titles. And admittedly, there was a time before Houston was in this conference where Kansas really ran this thing. There were 26 different players I could find that had won 4 conference titles or had been on 4 different conference title teams, all Kansas alums. Of those 26, only 14 were starters. So I went ahead and cut the other 12. I was okay, if you didn't start for any of those 4 teams, let alone most of those 4 teams, I don't know that you really fit into this conversation. So I cut off 12 of them really quickly. Of those 14, only 4 had a national championship on their resume like LJ did. And I think that kind of speaks to the idea of being a winner here. Being the greatest of all time involves winning. Right? I think that's going to run with LJ in this conversation. The notable names I thought, though, interestingly, several of them did not have that national championship ring that LJ had at Baylor. And that is very possible he gets in the court, knock on wood, not trying to jinx it, but like Houston's good enough that things could happen for them this year, right? Devontae Graham, I think, is the most clear-cut comparison. He's a fairly recent one at Kansas. was an All-American, was a two-time All-Big 12 guy, had no ring. Perry Ellis, a big guy, or played a forward spot, 3 times All-Big 12, had an All-American year, also had no ring. Frank Mason, 3 times All-Big 12 guy, was Big 12 Player of the Year one time, 3 National Player of the Year type of awards, whether it's offensive, defensive, like those kind of things, right? But Frank Mason also had no ring. Sharon Collins, 2-time All-Big 12, was 6th Man of the Year, had a 2008 National Championship. That year was his 6th Man of the year, so he won a starter, but he also did participate a lot and was an All-American his senior year. Not the same year as he won the national championship, but you got me right. Tyshawn Taylor had no ring, All Big 12. That team did lose in the NCAA finals to a Kentucky team. Those are the guys I see as the most competitive out of this Kansas group for LJ. And I think LJ is going to be above all of those guys. He'll finish this season and have 3 different times he was on an all Big 12 team, right? He led the Big 12 in 3-point percentage 2 of those seasons. If the season were to stop today, he would be leading it in 3 of those seasons in 3-point percentage. I think that's pretty important given the way the game has evolved, right? If you look at his point total, he's known as a scorer, obviously. We have 1 regular season game left plus the tournaments, and he just needs 73 points to have more points to his name than any one of the 26 options we've mentioned. But that's possible, right? He'd have the most points of any of the people that have 4 Big 12 titles to their name. So individually, he's doing more scoring. As a team player, he's doing more winning. I think this all plays into him being that greatest Big 12 player of all time. I also think it's worth mentioning that he's always shared a backcourt with another, if not more than one, dominant guard. At Baylor was the Keontae Georges, the Adam Flagler, whatever, right? But at Houston, he had to share the court with Jamal Shead last year. We know what Jamal Shead did and how Jamal Shead dominated as a scorer when he needed to, right? That was important, but it also meant that those were shots that didn't come from LJ, right? I mean, that's part of it. And then this year, we've seen how smooth the offense runs through Milos. And Milos Uzan is kind of taking that point guard role and running with it again a lot better over the course of the year, right? And LJ is getting a lot of great looks, but he is playing the off guard in that way, right? He's not like a dominant point guard that giving the ball and was going to go full speed like a Frank Mason or a Devontae Graham were, right? And so I think that playing the off guard is actually making his case more interesting here, right? Because, the theory here being, I guess, that, if he had the ball in his hands more, he'd score more, right? And I think that's a fairly simple, connection to be making. I think what fascinates me about LJ is the growth. And I spoke to someone, Isaac Shead, on Locked On College Basketball for Tuesday about this, but I thought about it, I think, all weekend long because it was senior day on Monday night and because they played that Kansas game, and he played so well in that Kansas game on Monday night, but he also played he's played really well all season for Houston. He's been the guy that it's him or J1, whichever one, but they can both put the team in their backpack and get things going. Milos had a couple games like that as well, but LJ's done it. It feels like more than anyone this year. And I think what's been fascinating though about and I can go back and pull up the tape, but I don't want to be critical of myself too terribly much. When LJ transferred in, the conversation was this guy is not Marcus Sasser, but he can help this team win. And he was a proven winner. He was a great scorer and shooter. And you're looking at him okay, he's not Marcus because Marcus just left the league, but he could be the hired gun for the Cougs in a lot of ways, right? And his game's evolved and changed. He's gotten so much better at so many different things. And I want to talk about that and the development and kind of what that looks like and why this is what's happening at Houston in a second. But I want to remind you guys that today's show is brought to you by Nissan. The Armada Team of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, our Locked On College Basketball experts are picking one team that stands out from top-seeded stars to unexpected upsets. These guys showcase the strength, sheer power needed to push their team forward. I promise you, I only got one vote out of the whole group of us. But this week's Armada and clear-cut team of the week are the Houston Cougars. Since joining the Big 12 last season, the Cougars have gone a combined 33-4 in conference games, winning the regular season title by multiple games both years. There's no team in college basketball that more capably embodies the rugged Armada than Kelvin Sampson squad. Houston's tenacious defense leads the nation in fewest points allowed per game for the second straight season. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer, and that's exactly what the Houston Cougars have done. Now, it's clear that our team of the week is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of Nissan's outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com. Parker Ainsworth, Locked On Coogs here, talking about LJ Cryer being the greatest Big 12 player of all time and what that means for guards at the University of Houston, because Cryer has said multiple times as the waning moments of the season are upon us that the reason he came to Houston, right, was become a more developed basketball player. And I want to stress that, like, he would have gotten a lot of shots if he'd stayed at Baylor. He could have gone somewhere else and been like that hired gun that just corner to corner, shoots threes, runs off screens, Reggie Miller style, gotten a ton of points. And we know he can score. He at least when he finished high school, was the all-time leading scorer in city of Houston and Texas high school basketball, I believe, at that point. I don't think it's been broken. He just fills it up, right? And honestly, what's interesting about his career path is he chose Houston to get better at everything else. Initially thought about coming here to play point guard, and I think that's, he's kind of shown that he can do it, but he's really more comfortable as the off guard or whatever. He also has played with some great point guards and had to do it a whole lot, bluntly, right? But I do think that, so if you go back to comments on my videos from when he first transferred over, I'm not a big message boards guy, but I'd imagine it's more of the same. Certainly the Twitter conversations, et cetera, right? Back when LJ first came to Houston, it was like, can't defend like the Cougs. He won't play at all. It was he can't rebound. What's he going to do there? It was all these things that he can't. And it feels like those are all now things that he can do, right? Like he's become a defender that Houston relies on to take away other teams' best guard under 6'3". Right? He's become a guy that has that incredibly important putback against Kansas to win the game on Monday night. He's become the guy that covers Jizzle James for stretches of the Cincinnati game when it got way too close on Saturday. He's become a reliable guy to do all those things. He's also diving on the floor for loose balls and getting extra physical with his body and contact down around the rim. And he's playing such a dramatically different type of basketball while still getting his shots, still getting his points, etc., and doing what he does best. He's gotten better at all those other things since coming to Houston. And that was the intention. That was the point. It takes a special kid to voluntarily be like, hey, I need a guy that's going to coach me up and make me better at the things that I'm not good at, right? That takes it like a certain mentality, especially that guy that, again, was having a successful college career, right? And I think, honestly, when I think about what makes him the greatest Big 12 player ever, it's also that, right? It's also that he saw the landscape, saw the Big 12, and said, I can go there and get better at this stuff. I don't have to sit here and stay with what's comfortable. I don't have to be the corner-to-corner three-point guy. I don't have to be the run-off screens three-point guy. I can be a great all-around basketball player if I can get coached by that guy, if I can buy into what that program's doing, right? Obviously, it helped to have Houston across the chest as a guy that was from Katy, right? That was a big part of it. But also, I think that there's something about the way Houston guards develop, right? We've gone back, and you could go back to Rob Gray, Corey Davis, Ladiki, Galen, Marcus, Jamal, Tremont when Tremont was here. You got right now, you got Milos, all these guards, right, come through and just get better. They just get better. And LJ is like the poster child for that. And I mentioned his name just now, but it kind of feels like Milos Uzan is next. We've seen him a couple of times this year put the team on his back and be that guy that takes over. We also know that Houston's system is very point guard friendly. I just listed a bunch of guys, very point guard friendly. When it comes to finding that guy, I think that's why Jamal Shead fit it so well for so long. And I also think for what's worth it, like next year without LJ, with some very talented young guys coming in, and it'll be Milos's fourth year next year in the Big 12. You're going to kind of see him take that next step as well. It's crazy to think like the steps he's taken this year, there is a next step, but it's inevitable with this program. The way they develop guards is going to give him a next step, even if you don't see one on the stratosphere, in the stratosphere. There is one for him if he's in the program, right? And I think that's going to be fascinating. And I think Milos is a pro. I don't know if he get drafted this summer or not. I got to talk to draft analysts about it. I've talked to him about Tugler. I think TA is a pro, but I don't know if he's a pro this summer or not. But I think that he's got the body shape and size and stuff to do it. I think Milos has some, obviously, God-given gifts. He's big, strong, fast, but he's also like shown a clear like work. He works through possessions, works through defensive screens, or like works through screens as a defender, I should say, and like works in a way that like feels professional as well. And it feels like LJ Cryer has a leg up because his years prior to Houston were more successful. He's the best Big 12 player of all time because of that. But as far as their time at Houston goes, Milos could at least do as well as, or like kind of take that next step next year as well and kind of have the same feeling kind of a Houston career, Houston portion of his career. And yeah, his Oklahoma years weren't as good as LJ's Baylor years, but like it feels like he's what's next. And I'm excited about it. I'm excited about seeing what this continued like guard you that Houston's turning into could become. Quentin Grimes. I didn't mention Quentin. He had 44 points in an NBA game. I didn't even mention Quentin earlier. And the thing, he's got Milos next. What comes after that, I think, is when it gets even more fun. Because Houston, when you look at their 2025 recruits, obviously their signees, it's star-studded. Isaiah Harwell, Kingston Fleming, Bryce Jackson, Shadow Creek would be a lot higher had he been healthy his full high school career, right? But he's a high-end 3-star kid. Those guards are coming in. They're coming in with big guy Chris Sinak too. I don't mean to say they're not, but you're going to see them develop into something special. They're going to kind of be what's next. And Houston's leaning into this guards thing. When you look at 2026s that have visited or 2026s that have a lot of contact with Houston, it's a bunch of guards. It's Christian Gibson, Cameron Lomax. They got Anthony Felici listed as like a guard wing. Caleb Holt came through and visited one time. Local guy, Jakai Cantave. It's a bunch of guards. As I look at my list here, that kind of running list I got going, guys tied to Houston potentially. It's a bunch of guards, and it always will be, because you're going to look at what has come through, what has been successful, and who's seeing these dramatic jumps and growths. And I don't mean to say Jawan Roberts, you look at the way that he changed the course of 6 years, it's incredible. Jarius Walker came here and was a one and done. He was so ready for the NBA, right? And like all those different things happened too. I mean, look at JVR, look at what JoJo has done, like Charlton, like all these different guys like have also come through at the bigs. I don't mean to say they haven't had any bigs or anything like that, but the way the guards develop and like the visible leaps they take from year to year are the reason you get a guy like LJ, get a guy like Milos, get a guy like Kingston coming in to be next. And it's freaking awesome. Guards win in March, and Houston's going to continue the trend and continue to grow and develop. And I will say that I think the one thing that would cement LJ Cryer as the greatest Big 12 player of all time, I mentioned there are 26 guys that have played in this conference as a Big 12 and had 4 conference titles. 14 of those guys started, right? 4 had an NC tie on the resume. None had 2. And LJ Cryer's got a real shot. And I knock on wood. I don't want to jinx it. Got to have a lot of things go right and got to do a lot of things well and got to get a lot better. Of course, the next couple weeks, like kind of fine tune things, right? but they've got a shot. And if he ends up making an All-American team, I think he will, and they win a title, I think we're talking about a lot bigger story here. And I don't mean to say I was here first. I think people are here with me. I think it's going to happen really, really obviously, very, very quickly if those things unfold like they might. So it's subscribe to Locked On Cougs. We talk about that, Big 12 things, football things, like a spring practice. It's March, so spring practice will be starting soon as well. All things Houston Cougars all the time. Locked On Cougs, the primary Locked On podcast network. That means your team every day. Go Cougs.